I went to buy one luxury car. But after being humiliated, I took the whole fleet with the saleswoman who offered me coffee. When I walked into that dealership, I wasn't dressed like the women you usually see in luxury ads. I wasn't in designer heels, and I didn't have a sparkling bag slung over my arm. My shoes were plain, my hair tied back in a simple ponytail, and I carried a worn leather purse that had been with me for years. I didn't care. I was just there for one thing, a car. But apparently, to them, I was invisible. The moment I stepped through those glass doors, I felt it. The looks, the smirks, the way the men in polished suits barely glanced my way before going back to laughing among themselves. It was like I had stepped into a place where I didn't belong. And the sad part? It wasn't new. I'd been looked at that way before, in restaurants, in meetings, even at family gatherings. People saw my outside and thought they already knew my story. But that day, the sting felt sharper. Maybe because I was excited. Maybe because I thought for once money would speak louder than looks. I was wrong. I walked slowly down the shiny floor, looking at rows of cars that cost more than some houses. Sleek, powerful machines in every color, polished so perfectly that my reflection stared back at me from every angle. I ran my fingers lightly over the hood of one, and that was when I heard it. "She's probably lost." The voice came from one of the salesmen. He said it quietly, but not quiet enough. The others chuckled, not even bothering to lower their voices. Another one added, "She's not here to buy. Look at her bag. Financing is 2 blocks down." My cheeks burned. I wanted to turn around and leave right there, but something in me stopped. I thought, no, not this time. I've been looked down on my whole life. Today, I'm not going to run from it. So I kept walking, even though my chest was tight. I looked at the cars, one by one, pretending not to hear their whispers, but every word sank in. No one came over. Not one of them bothered to ask if I needed help. I stood next to a black luxury SUV, one I had actually been considering, and waited. Nothing. They kept laughing by their desks, sipping espresso like I was part of the background. That was when she appeared. She wasn't dressed like the others. Her suit was older, not as sharp. Her hair was gray, pinned back neatly, and her shoes looked like they had carried her through years of hard work. She walked toward me with a smile, not the fake kind I'd seen 1,000 times, but one that felt real. "Would you like some coffee, dear?" she asked. Her voice was warm, gentle, like she had said those words to hundreds of people, and yet somehow it felt like she meant them just for me. I blinked at her, surprised. "Coffee?" "Yes," she said, nodding toward a small counter in the corner. "We have fresh coffee brewing. You look like you've had a long day. Can I get you a cup?" It sounds silly now, but that question almost brought tears to my eyes. Because while the others laughed at me, she saw me. Not a customer, not a number, but a person. I nodded, my voice small. "That would be nice, thank you." She smiled and walked off, and a minute later she came back with a steaming cup. She handed it to me like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Here you go. Cream and sugar are on the counter if you'd like." I wrapped my hands around the cup, letting the warmth sink into my fingers. And in that moment, something shifted. I didn't know it yet, but that small act of kindness was about to change everything. Because while the men in suits kept laughing, this woman, the one they probably overlooked too, was about to sell me not just one car, but the entire fleet. And when it happened, no one in that dealership would ever forget it. I guess I should tell you a little about myself so you understand why that day hit me the way it did. People always assume things when they see me. They see the plain clothes, the old bag, the fact that I don't wear flashy jewelry, and they build a story in their heads. A story where I'm ordinary. A story where I don't belong in certain places. What they don't know is the real story. I grew up in a small town. My family wasn't rich. My dad was a mechanic, and my mom worked in a bakery. We lived in a modest house with squeaky floors and second-hand furniture. I learned early that if you wanted something in life, you had to fight for it. Nothing was going to be handed to me. School wasn't easy. Kids teased me because of my weight, my clothes, even my lunch. Teachers overlooked me because I wasn't the loud one with perfect hair or the popular one from a wealthy family. I learned to keep my head down, but inside, I promised myself something. One day, I'd prove them wrong. I worked harder than anyone. I studied, I saved, I picked up jobs no one else wanted. At 16, I was working at the local diner, cleaning tables, refilling coffee, memorizing every customer's order because tips meant survival. It wasn't glamorous, but I was proud. When I finally got to college, it wasn't because someone paid my way. It was because I earned scholarships and juggled 3 jobs. I'd stay up late studying, then wake up at dawn to work. People looked at me and saw tired or poor. I saw determined. Fast forward a few years, and I'd built something real. I started small, just a side business fixing old computers and selling them online. That turned into a tech service, which eventually grew into a company. I reinvested every dime, learned how to handle money, and by the time most people were still figuring out what to do with their lives, I had built a career that gave me freedom. But here's the thing. I never changed the way I looked, not because I couldn't, but because I didn't feel the need to dress rich to prove I was rich. My comfort mattered more than someone else's opinion, and that's what people never understand. They think success has a look. That wealth comes with a uniform of designer brands, perfect makeup, and spotless shoes. But real wealth, at least to me, was being able to walk into a store and not worry about the price tags. It was being able to take care of my family, to pay for my niece's college, to buy my parents a home without debt. Still, everywhere I went, the same pattern repeated. Judged for my size, judged for my clothes, judged for being a woman in a man's world. I can't count how many times I sat in business meetings where the men addressed everyone but me, even though I was the one signing the checks. You'd think I'd be used to it by now, but the truth is, it still stung. Every single time. Because no matter how strong you are, being treated as less than human leaves scars. So when I walked into that dealership, I carried all those years of judgment with me. I wasn't just fighting to buy a car. I was carrying the weight of every time someone laughed at me, every time someone dismissed me, every time someone decided I wasn't worth their time. And here's the part that makes me laugh now. I wasn't even planning to buy more than one car. My plan that day was simple. Get a vehicle for myself, something reliable, safe, and yes, maybe a little luxurious, something that felt like a reward for all my hard work. But the way they treated me? It triggered something deep inside. A memory of every no, every sneer, every rejection. And it made me want to show them who I really was. Not with words, not with yelling, but with action. That's why the woman with the coffee meant so much. Because before she even knew who I was, before she knew what I could afford, she treated me with dignity. And for me, that was worth more than any car in that showroom. People see the surface, but they never bother to ask what's underneath. That day, those men saw a woman they thought couldn't buy a bicycle, let alone a luxury car. But what they didn't see was the years of sacrifice, the strength, the grit, and the success that lived underneath. And soon, they were going to find out. When I think back to that day, what still sticks with me isn't the cars. It's the way they made me feel. I faced humiliation before, but there was something about being in that showroom, surrounded by shiny machines that screamed wealth, and realizing I was invisible in plain sight. After the older saleswoman offered me coffee, she went to grab it, and I stayed near one of the cars I liked. I was tracing the lines of the hood with my fingers, trying to picture myself driving it. For a moment, I let myself feel excited again, like maybe this would be the day I finally got the car I dreamed of. That's when I overheard them. A group of 3 salesmen were standing by their desks, not far from where I was. They weren't whispering anymore. They weren't even trying to be discreet. "Don't waste your time," one of them said, pointing his chin in my direction. "She's just here to window shop." Another laughed. "Maybe she's waiting for her husband or her boss, someone who can actually pay for one of these. The third added, "Look at her bag, look at her shoes. She's not serious. If she asks for a test drive, I'll bet she just wants to take selfies." Their laughter echoed through the showroom, bouncing off the glass and metal. I froze, my stomach dropping. My face grew hot, and I could feel that familiar lump forming in my throat. I wanted to shout. I wanted to tell them I could buy every car in that building if I wanted to. But instead, I just stood there, gripping my purse strap until my knuckles turned white. Because that's what humiliation does. It freezes you. It makes you feel small, even when you know better. One of the salesmen finally decided to approach me. He walked over slowly, wearing a smile that wasn't really a smile. It was more like a smirk. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "Are you lost? Service entrance is around the back if you're looking for maintenance." I blinked at him, stunned. "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I'm here to buy a car." His smirk grew wider. "A car? Here?" He glanced at his co-workers who were watching from across the room, trying not to laugh. "Well, we have some more affordable options down the street. I could give you their address." My chest tightened. I swallowed hard, forcing myself not to cry. I hated that my body always betrayed me in moments like this, tears pressing at the corners of my eyes when all I wanted was to look strong. "I know where I am," I said, "and I know what I want." He raised his eyebrows like I'd just told him I planned to buy a rocket. "Do you now? And what's that?" I pointed at the black SUV I'd been admiring. "That one." He laughed, actually laughed, right in front of me. "That's one of our top models, fully loaded. Are you sure you don't want to look at something a little smaller?" The words cut deep, and not just because of the implication. He wasn't talking about the car. He was talking about me, my size, my appearance, everything about me that he thought didn't belong in his world. At that moment, I felt a mix of rage and shame boiling inside me. I wanted to scream, to tell him exactly who I was and what I could afford, but I stayed silent. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. I sipped the coffee the older saleswoman had just handed me, her timing perfect, like she knew I needed an anchor. Her presence calmed me. She didn't say a word, but the look she gave me, kind, steady, almost protective, was enough to remind me I wasn't crazy. I wasn't wrong for being there. They were wrong for treating me like that. The salesman gave me a once-over, then shook his head. "I'll get you a brochure," he said finally, like he was doing me a favor. He walked back toward his desk, muttering something to his colleagues that made them all chuckle again. And that was it. They dismissed me. They wrote me off as if I didn't matter. What they didn't know was that in that exact moment, they sealed their fate. Because I wasn't just going to buy a car that day, I was going to show them exactly who I was. I'll never forget the way she handed me that cup of coffee. It wasn't fancy, just a plain white mug, steam rising in gentle curls. But in that moment, it felt like the most valuable thing in the world. Because it didn't come with judgment, or sarcasm, or a hidden agenda. It came with kindness. She set it in my hands and smiled. "Careful, it's hot. Cream and sugar are over there if you'd like." I nodded, my throat tight. "Thank you." She didn't rush off like the others did when they thought someone wasn't worth their time. Instead, she stayed by my side, as if she had decided I mattered. And you know what? That small gesture made all the difference. We stood there in silence for a few seconds while I sipped. Then she asked, "Is there a particular model you're interested in?" Her tone wasn't mocking. It wasn't skeptical. It was genuine curiosity, the way you'd ask a neighbor what kind of pie they like. I hesitated, glancing back at the SUV I'd pointed out earlier. That one, actually, the black SUV. Her eyes followed mine. "Ah, good choice. Strong engine, smooth ride, one of our best sellers. Do you want me to walk you through the features?" I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the contrast was so sharp. Just minutes before, another salesman had told me to go down the street for something more affordable. And here was this woman, treating me like I had every right to be there, like my interest was valid. "Yes," I said quietly. "I'd like that." So she did. She walked me around the SUV, pointing out the details with pride. She explained the safety features, the horsepower, even the interior design. Her knowledge was clear, but more than that, her passion was real. She wasn't just selling a car. She believed in what she was saying. When I asked questions, she answered them patiently, without the condescending tone the others had used. And when I admitted I wasn't sure which model might fit me best, she didn't roll her eyes. She listened. She thought about it. She cared enough to consider my needs. "Let me show you another option," she said, leading me across the showroom to a different vehicle. Along the way, I caught the smirks of the other salesmen. One of them even whispered, "Waste of time," loud enough for me to hear. But she didn't flinch. She just kept walking, head high, as if their opinions didn't matter. And in that moment, I respected her more than I could say. We spent nearly an hour together. She showed me different models, let me sit in the driver's seat, adjusted mirrors for me, even offered to schedule a test drive. Every time I looked at her, I saw sincerity. She wasn't faking it. At one point, as I sat behind the wheel of a car, I asked her, "Why are you the only one who's helping me?" She gave a small shrug and smiled. "Because you walked in here, and that means you deserve respect. Simple as that." Her answer was so straightforward it almost brought tears to my eyes. Respect. That's all I had wanted, not special treatment, not flattery, just respect. And maybe she knew it, maybe she didn't, but she had already sold me, not on the car, but on her. Because here's the truth. When you've been overlooked your whole life, you don't forget the people who finally see you. By the time we returned to the SUV, I had made up my mind. Not just about the car, but about what I was going to do next. As she handed me another fresh cup of coffee, I looked her in the eye and said, "Do you earn commission?" She blinked, surprised by the sudden question. "Yes, I do." "Good," I said, a smile tugging at my lips, "because today's going to be a good day for you." She tilted her head, curious, but didn't press. She just smiled warmly, as if she was grateful enough for the time we had shared already. Meanwhile, across the room, the men were still laughing, still ignoring me. They had no idea. No idea that the woman they dismissed, the one they thought couldn't afford a thing, was about to turn their world upside down. And it all started with a cup of coffee. The moment I asked her about commission, something inside me settled. It wasn't just about buying a car anymore. It was about showing her, the one person who had treated me with kindness, that her respect mattered. And at the same time, it was about showing the others that their arrogance had blinded them. I set down the coffee cup and looked her straight in the eye. "I'd like to see your most expensive models. All of them." For a split second, her eyebrows rose. She wasn't mocking me. She was just surprised. Then she nodded, her professionalism kicking in. "Of course. Follow me." We walked past the salesman, and I could feel their eyes on me. One of them muttered under his breath, "Here we go." Another chuckled, "She's going to waste your whole afternoon." I ignored them. For the first time, I felt in control. The saleswoman, her name was Margaret, I later learned, led me to a line of sleek sports cars, the kind you usually only see in commercials or parked in front of million-dollar houses. She introduced each one with care, explaining the engines, the luxury interiors, the unique features. I listened closely, asking detailed questions. "What's the horsepower on this one? What's the warranty coverage? How's the resale value compared to the SUV?" I could see her surprise growing, but so was her respect. She realized quickly that I wasn't just some random person walking in off the street. I knew what I was talking about. I'd done my research. Across the room, the men started paying attention too. I noticed one of them stop laughing, his smile fading as he saw me jotting down notes on my phone. Another leaned in closer to watch, whispering something to his co-worker, probably wondering if I was serious. Margaret treated every question with patience. When I asked to sit inside one of the cars, she opened the door for me and waited. I ran my hands over the steering wheel, the leather seats, the dashboard. I could see my reflection in the mirror, and for once I didn't see the girl they were mocking. I saw the woman who had built herself from the ground up. I asked to see another. Then another. And another. By the time we had gone through the fifth car, the men were no longer laughing. One of them finally walked over, trying to act like he suddenly cared. "Ma'am," he said, forcing a smile. "If you'd like, I can show you some models myself, perhaps something a little more practical." Before I could answer, Margaret stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "She's with me." The salesman blinked, caught off guard, and looked at me like I'd made a mistake. "Are you sure? I can—" "Yes," I cut him off, my tone sharper than before. "I'm sure." He walked away, his face tight, and I felt a small flicker of satisfaction. I turned back to Margaret. "I think I'd like to see the entire fleet, every single model available." Her eyes widened again, but she didn't question me. She just nodded. "We can do that." So we did. One by one, she showed me everything. From the top-of-the-line sports cars to the luxury sedans, from the massive SUVs to the smaller but equally refined vehicles. She walked me through the details, the prices, the availability, and the more we went on, the more the room changed. The laughter stopped. The whispers grew. The other salesmen started shifting uncomfortably at their desks, realizing that maybe, just maybe, they had been wrong. At one point, I caught one of them whispering to another, "Who is she?" I almost smiled. Finally, after hours of reviewing, I set my phone down and looked at Margaret. "I'll take them." She blinked. "Take them?" "All of them," I said. "The entire fleet. I want every car we've looked at today." For a moment, there was silence. Absolute silence. Even the background music in the showroom seemed to fade away. Margaret's lips parted, her eyes searching my face for any sign of a joke. But there wasn't one. You want to purchase all of them?" she asked carefully. "Yes," I said, my voice steady, "and I want you to be the one who gets the commission." Across the room, I heard a chair scrape loudly as one of the salesmen shot to his feet. Another dropped his pen. Their faces were pale, their mouths slightly open, like they'd just witnessed something impossible. But it was happening, and I was enjoying every second. Margaret swallowed hard, her voice trembling now, but with excitement. "All right," she said, "let's get the paperwork started." And just like that, the tables had turned. The men who had laughed at me, mocked me, dismissed me, they were frozen in place, powerless. And the woman who had offered me a simple cup of coffee was about to have the best day of her career. Because in that moment, I wasn't just buying cars, I was buying respect. The look on their faces when I said I'd take the entire fleet was priceless. For once, the room was quiet. No whispers, no chuckles, no sarcastic comments, just stunned silence. Margaret was the first to move. She cleared her throat, pulled herself together, and gestured for me to follow her to her desk. "Right this way, ma'am. We'll get everything sorted." I could tell she was still processing what had just happened, but she handled it with professionalism. That only made me respect her more. She didn't fumble. She didn't doubt me. She just did her job with the same steady care she'd shown from the very beginning. As we sat down, I pulled out my checkbook and my bank information. One by one, we went through the details. Down payments, financing options, delivery schedules. I had it all ready. This wasn't a whim. I knew exactly what I was doing. Meanwhile, the men who had mocked me hovered at a distance, watching with pale faces. Every time I glanced up, one of them would quickly look away, pretending to be busy. But their eyes betrayed them. They were panicking. Finally, one of them couldn't stand it anymore. He walked over, his smile forced so tight it looked painful. "Excuse me, ma'am. I just wanted to apologize if there was any misunderstanding earlier. Of course, I'd be more than happy to assist you with your purchase." I didn't even look at him. I kept my eyes on Margaret as I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "She's handling everything. She's the only one I'll be working with." The man froze, his jaw clenched. He nodded stiffly and walked back to his desk. It felt good. As the paperwork piled up, Margaret glanced at me with wide eyes. I don't even know what to say. This is the biggest sale I've ever had." I smiled at her. "You don't have to say anything. You earned it. You treated me with respect when no one else did. That's all it took." Her hands trembled slightly as she processed the forms. I could see the emotion in her eyes, the gratitude, the disbelief. When we finished signing, she excused herself to finalize things with the manager. I watched her walk across the showroom, her posture straighter than before. For once, every head in the room was turned toward her, not in pity, not in dismissal, but in recognition. She had just sold the biggest deal in the history of that dealership, and it was all hers. The manager, a stiff-looking man in a tailored suit, walked over to me next. His tone was suddenly dripping with politeness. "Ma'am, I just want to personally thank you for your business. We are honored to have you as a customer. If there's anything else we can do—" I cut him off. "There is something you can do." He blinked. "Of course, anything." I stood, my voice steady. "You can teach your salesmen that respect costs nothing. You lost a sale today, not because I couldn't afford it, but because they couldn't see me. Remember that." The room went silent again. The men shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their faces red. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth hung heavy in the air, louder than any shouting could have been. Margaret returned with the final documents. She was smiling now, a real radiant smile that lit up her whole face. "Everything's confirmed. We'll arrange delivery for the full fleet. You should have the vehicles within the week." I signed the last page, set down the pen, and looked around the room. For once, no one dared to laugh. I turned back to Margaret and shook her hand firmly. "Congratulations. You deserve every bit of this." Her eyes shone with tears she was trying to hold back. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means to me." "Oh, I think I do," I said softly. "Because I know what it feels like to be overlooked, to be dismissed, to be treated like you don't belong. You reminded me today that kindness is more powerful than arrogance, and I wanted to remind you, and them, that respect pays off." With that, I gathered my things, lifted my chin, and walked out of the dealership. Behind me, I could feel their stares burning into my back. Not the stares of mockery anymore, but the stares of men who realized they'd just lost the biggest commission of their careers. And I didn't regret a single second, because that day, it wasn't just about cars. It was about dignity. It was about proving that worth isn't measured by clothes or bags or appearances. It's measured by how you treat people. And they failed that test. Miserably. The cars arrived a week later. One by one, trucks rolled up to my property, unloading gleaming machines that had once been symbols of arrogance to me. Now, they were symbols of something else. Respect earned and kindness rewarded. Neighbors gathered at the fence line, whispering, wide-eyed. I could almost hear the questions in their heads. Why so many cars? Who is she? What happened? And I didn't bother explaining. Let them wonder. For me, the cars weren't trophies. They weren't about showing off. They were about the moment in that dealership when one woman treated me like I mattered. They were about proving to myself that I wasn't invisible anymore. A few days later, I got a call from Margaret. Her voice was shaky, full of emotion. "I wanted to thank you again," she said. "You didn't just change my month, you changed my year. That commission, it's more than I ever thought I'd see in my career. My husband and I can finally pay off our mortgage. I can help my granddaughter with her college tuition. I don't even know how to thank you." I smiled, my heart warm. "You don't have to thank me, Margaret. You earned it. All I did was give the business to the person who respected me." There was silence on the line for a moment, and then she said softly, "You have no idea how rare that is. People usually overlook me too. They see my age, they see a woman, and they think I don't know what I'm talking about. But you made me feel valued." Her words struck me. We had more in common than I realized. Both of us had been dismissed, underestimated, treated like we didn't belong. And yet, in the middle of all that, we had found each other. That's what stayed with me most. Not the cars, not the looks on the men's faces, not even the satisfaction of proving them wrong. It was her, the kindness in her eyes, the way she saw me when no one else did. Since that day, I've thought a lot about how quick people are to judge, how often we size each other up in a split second based on clothes, weight, age, gender. We think we know the story when really we haven't read a single page. But respect costs nothing, and it can change everything. I keep one of the cars parked in front of my house, not because I need it, but because every time I see it, I remember. I remember the sting of humiliation, but more importantly, I remember the power of kindness. I remember that all it took was a cup of coffee and a smile to turn an ordinary day into something extraordinary. And I wish the men in that dealership could understand the lesson. Because what they lost that day wasn't just money. They lost trust. They lost dignity. They lost the chance to be remembered for something good. Instead, they'll be remembered for what they didn't do, for the respect they refused to give. As for Margaret, she told me she'd never forget me. But the truth is, I'll never forget her either, because in a world that so often makes us feel invisible, finding one person who sees you can be life-changing. And maybe that's the real story here. Not the cars, not the money, not even the humiliation. The real story is about the power of simple kindness, about the way one small gesture can ripple into something much bigger. So if you've ever been dismissed, if you've ever been laughed at or treated like you don't belong, I hope you hear me when I say this. You are not invisible. You are not worthless. Sometimes the world is blind, but all it takes is one person who sees you to remind you of who you really are. For me, that reminder came in the form of a warm cup of coffee, handed to me by a woman who believed I deserved it. And that made all the difference. All it took was a cup of coffee, and one woman who treated me like I mattered. If my story touched you in any way, subscribe and tell me yours.